welcome everybody to Building Resilience and thinking about the programme Recovery Through Enterprise is actually really, this topic's really pertinent to that. This is around, what we're doing to support other people. So whether that's other businesses, whether that's our colleagues, whether that's our volunteers, but it's also looking at our personal resilience. How can we ensure that we can continue to cope, continue to be resilient as we move forward through the current situation, this current lockdown, and into what could be a very different winter period. So I'm going to take us through some slides. If there's anything in particular that you want to raise, let me know, but at the end there'll be a chance for us to kind of talk about the things that we've got that I've covered, just to see if there's anything to either clarify or hear about your experiences. So I'm talking about three things mainly. One is around, I've gone for 3 T's. So calling it turnover, time and thinking. But actually this is about, turnover is about money, obviously, but it's also around our customer base and how we look after all of our stakeholders. Time is moving more to you, your teams, and those around you. How we protect ourselves and how we think about using our time in a more targeted way. And then thinking moves us into this thing around keeping ourselves motivated, but also stepping out of what we're doing and thinking about how we can plan to build better. So whether you're a commercial organisation, whether you're involved in the charitable sector, the not-for-profit, public sector, this is all about what we can do. And then finishing with some really quite sort of personal things to support ourselves around resilience. So when we're thinking about turnover and thinking about sort of existing customers, for customers that could be our volunteers as well, but it's making sure that what we're doing is trying not to forget them. So very often we're thinking about the next project, the next client, those kinds of things. And we might forget to look after those that we've got already. So what could we do in that regard? I think that we rely too heavily at the moment on email. So perhaps with a volunteer base, it might be picking up the phone. It might be sending some handwritten notes out to people. Just doing something unexpected to keep in touch with those that we rely on day in, day out. So I'd really encourage you to do that. And those businesses that you're talking to, encouraging them to find new ways to look after their existing and loyal customer base. And making sure that, actually for the businesses, they've got a range of sales channels. So all their eggs aren't in one basket. They're actually thinking about how they can expand their market base and looking at market making. And we'll come on to that in a little bit on the next slide. And then constantly talking to people about what you're doing. So developing that sales pipeline. And I think this is where, in accordance with whatever you're doing, whether you're a tourism business, whether you're a small charity, anything, looking at how we're kind of growing what we're doing is really important. And reducing non-essential expenditure. So this is just making sure that we're keeping an eye on expenditure. And I know for funded organisations, it is not necessarily particularly relevant, but for your businesses, encouraging them to keep a track on their cash flow um, is absolutely vital. But this is really relevant at the moment. The bottom bullet point, reaching out to others for referrals. And this can be referrals for new business, it can be referrals for new volunteers, new programs, new projects, new connections. There's nothing wrong in actually saying, I wonder whether you could help me. Could you help me find some business? Could you refer me to somebody else? And the personal approach often works better than something that is more remote, such as social media. So I don't know whether any of you have seen the Ansof Matrix. This is quite established. Some criticisms around it are that actually you can't take it in isolation. But it's really interesting because it looks at your marketplace and your products, the existing, where you are now, and where you might want to be in the future. And so the low risk area is where you are now, your existing marketplace, your existing products, the things that you're currently doing. And I'm sure that most people have got a strategy written down, hopefully, because it's always good to look at things and remind ourselves of what we're doing and why we're doing it, but also then thinking about the future. And you know, I know that some people just have a general view in their mind about where they're going with their existing markets and their existing products. That's low risk. We move into more of a risk when we're bringing in new products. So thinking about some of the food and drink producers that we're supporting, this is an obvious next step. And what can happen sometimes is that people get really carried away. So they go from a successful range of 2 or 3 products to 23 products. Now, that's more of a risk because of the time of development and particularly the increased costs. Actually, people might not want, I don't know, a Marmite and banana spread, for example, or, you know, something really extreme. So you've got to really have a good strategy about how you're going to develop that. And the other medium risk area is when we're looking at new markets for our existing products. We can think that everybody might want to take advantage of something without doing the research. And of course, undertaking research is really important to identifying what's going to work. The most high risk area is where we diversify and we do something differently. And this applies across any organizational structure. So whether you're a charity, a not-for-profit, a business, once we diversify, this has the highest risk. And I think going through the pandemic, what we've noticed is that many people are looking at diversifying, and some have been hugely successful and some haven't. My encouragement with this slide is to, and the keys in the word strategy, is to really think about it. Don't just respond without thinking, without planning, without looking at cost. And where you've got risk, it doesn't mean you shouldn't take risk. There's a great Japanese saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I think that's the spirit of the nature of this aspect of resilience. So let's move on to time. Excuse me. So what are you doing with your time? Do you know how your day's split? Do you have some time where you are focused on next week or next month? Do you have time to be thinking rather about the detail of something, but about the wider, bigger picture? Do you know what other businesses, other charities, other organizations are doing? It's really hard when we're busy to actually pause and be reflective. And it's important to do that because we need to avoid burnout. So it's really easy to be a busy fool. It's much harder to have better focus. And obviously, I'm not referring to this seminar, but by focusing um, on our activities, we can then start to think, okay, if I'm doing this, what am I not doing that I should be doing? Often that's the thing around making sure that when we've got a large job to do, we actually cut it down into smaller chunks. And then making time to work on the business, not in it. And I know some of you in the room that are dealing with businesses, very often that's where people can get stuck. Head is down, working on the business. Sorry, in the business when it should be working on the business. So at the end of this, I'm going to ask everybody, of the things that I've talked about, which aspect resonated with you? Which aspect do you think is something that you would say you need to kind of do slightly differently?
Oh, well, I can easily go first on that, Rachel.
Okay.
And just say right at the bottom when you're talking about making sure you don't just keep your head down and look up
Yeah.
the wider business. Really easy to do.
Yeah.
Focus on the detail because there's so much detail.
Yeah.
And not
Absolutely.
give yourself time. I have to actually kick myself to do that. That is something
Yeah.
I physically have to schedule into my week.
Yeah. And that's a really good strategy to actually block out some time in order to do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Rachel, I think that applies to me too. I'm struggling to actually, I think because the workload is just since lockdown 2 is actually quadrupled for us. I'm just finding that even to try and get out for half an hour at lunchtime with the dog is almost like, well, actually, my time is more better spent in the office. Well, no, really, I'm burning myself out.
Yeah.
And the dog's looking at me as if to say, like, well, we're not going out today. And I think, like Amanda said, if you don't in the diet, if you don't schedule yourself out, you just find that you're not doing it. I've got back pain at the moment, and that is because I think I'm sitting on this chair for far too long.
Yeah.
So yes, we really, really need to sit down and make time for ourselves as well.
Yeah. And you've given up half an hour today to kind of listen to this, and I think if you can build that into every day, it's absolutely vital. And a dog's a great excuse, Anna Marie, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that moves to what's probably the most important part, which is actually our thinking. Our approach and thinking colours what we do. So we need to kind of think about that really carefully. And all leaders, I do believe, if you imagine as we're walking, we've often got one foot on the ground. Well, we'd need to, or we'd fall over, wouldn't we? But that our next foot is kind of lifting up and moving forward. And so we can do that even when we think that nothing, is secure in the future, even if we don't know what's happening. If we can just take one step forward in our thinking, that will be helpful. So the kind of analogy of us walking, we have got one foot on the ground. We are dealing with the things that need to be dealt with. We are going through the detail of that. But actually, the other foot is thinking about tomorrow, next week, supporting the people that we're working with, supporting our customers, our volunteers, our partners. That's a really good way of actually thinking about what all of us are doing all of the time, but just reminding ourselves of it so it becomes more conscious, comes to the top of our thinking, because actually it will lead us to be more optimistic. And this quote from Ralph Waldo Trine, just really demonstrates that if we're constantly pessimistic, then we're right, aren't we? That's what we think, that's how we act, that's how we behave. If we can be optimistic most of the time, that can be helpful then in terms of how we think, how we relate to other people, how we can do things. And I think that I'm sure you'll have seen the circles of influence or circles of control. So there's a large circle around the outside of a big circle, and in that are all the things that we can't control. And within the circle is another circle. And that's full of all the things that we can influence. So we can influence many of the things that are out of control, but some of the things we can't, and we just have to acknowledge that. And inside of that is a tiny circle, and that's what we can control. So what can we control? Anyone have any thoughts?
The silence isn't good, is it?
Well, we can control how we think about things. So we can actually, if something goes wrong, or if something feels as though you just can't move forward from it, we can try and think about things in a different way. We can try to change our thinking. We can find a different approach. We can look at the situation from the other person's point of view and see if we can understand their perspective. And in doing so, we can change the way we think about things. That is one thing that we can control. And often people say to me, no, that's rubbish, we can't control that. Well, it's hard, and we can't always do it. But I think once we start to do that, either using the mechanism of thinking about it from someone else's perspective, or trying to look for a more positive spin on what's just occurring, or looking for the benefits of a certain situation, that can change how we think about something. And then we realize that actually we are in control of that. And the last thing on this slide in terms of our thinking is actually when we're going through something that's very difficult, there's always the opportunity to be thinking, if I had planned for this, would I have done it differently? Or questions that enable us to see a different route to move forward. And of course, we need time to do that. So that goes back to the previous slide. You know, how many brilliant ideas have you had in the shower, walking the dog, going for a run, staring into the middle distance, cooking, whatever it might be, when you're not actually focused on something, but your brain's working it out. Can we build better? Can we do it differently? There's a quote from Fred Rogers: only when you think you're at the end of something, you may realize that actually you're at the beginning of something else. And I think that fits into this kind of view that not everything that's negative is actually going to be bad in the future. So how do we help ourselves? Well, I think that's where resilience comes in. Here's a really nice explanation of resilience. And here's another one. So resilience, the ability to bounce back when things don't go as planned. And being resilient won't make your problems go away, but it will give you the ability to see past them, find enjoyment in life, and handle stress better. The American Psychological Association believes that we can learn resilience, that resilience actually is ordinary, because most of us can do that. Most of us can learn how to be resilient. So it doesn't mean that you won't experience difficulty or distress in the future, but the techniques that you learn to be able to get back up again on that 8th occasion will then give you behaviors that you know and you can do and you can carry on doing. And it really helps with our mental health. The fact that we can get up in the morning and carry on, that we can be positive and constructive, and especially when we're working from home and we're going through the same routine every day, although we might be talking to different people, we might see different faces on our Zooms, actually realizing what we're doing can be helpful and remind us that resilience is actually quite ordinary. So in that regard, there are a number of things that we can do. Self-esteem. So often self-esteem goes when we're feeling out of control, doesn't it? And this ability to be looking at our own strengths and identifying those things about ourselves that we can recognize are good. Now, I know for a fact that most of us find that really hard. So, you know, thinking through what you might say to yourself, what you might think about yourself. So that's why I'm looking at your faces now, just to see whether there are things that come to mind, or whether I can't see you, Anna Marie, but whether there are things that, you know, you're pondering.
Sorry about that. I know. I've actually tried a few things, but it's saying it's not allowing me to do it for some reason.
Oh, well,
sorry.
So looking at our own strengths is absolutely vital. Thinking about what we can do and we do well, and being proud of doing that. Mindfulness. I do think that we can be mindful in all kinds of ways. If you struggle with this, then there are some amazing apps to help you with kind of 10 minutes of meditation or something else. I don't know whether anyone has tried any of these or not. But mindfully walking, which is a beautiful thing to do along the Nen Valley, you know, when you're looking around and you're noticing those things that are green, or you're kind of switching off so much of your visual stimulation, although you're walking and seeing where you're going, but actually you're listening to the noises that you hear around you. Having those moments where you say it's okay to sit down for 15 minutes and to just focus on something that's gone well today. So that can help build resilience. I've talked about choosing to recognize what you can control and how you react to things. So some of us in the room are really good at kind of keeping things internally and not reacting. You know, if we get into an argument with somebody, we're just fueling that person's own inadequacies, I want to say. That's probably an incorrect word here. But just thinking through, you know, how we react to somebody. And when we're reacting really strongly, to just try and find that third person voice that says, well, this is what my brain says. Hello, Rachel, that's a really interesting way you've just handled that. You know, might not be the way we would want to do it. Nurturing a strong network of support is vital, and that's not just around us at home with our friends, but actually I do strongly believe it's at work as well. Have you got somebody who's saying, how are you going? How are you doing? How are you going? What are you doing? And being supportive around those times when you don't seem to be quite as calm as you normally do. And then, of course, for some people, having a meaningful purpose that's more powerful than the things that are challenging us can be immensely useful. So I'm not just thinking about faith, for example, but that could be working for an organization. It could be following a particular vision. I think that's when you can really notice resilience in people. And how often do we kind of move from one thing to the next without saying, actually, that was pretty good. That went really well. So we just need to recognize that, you know, we are achieving things as we're working. And by doing that, that helps to strengthen our resilience. And of course, sustaining, not just, you know, going off for a run or doing really extreme fitness, but if we are stuck on a chair all day, we do need to find those ways to kind of move about. We do need to make sure we're eating properly, not just a COVID diet of crisps and wine. I speak from personal experience there. And we do need to make sure that we're sleeping well.
I was just going to say, have you got a camera in my room or something?
No.
How did you know that was my diet?
Yeah.
Diet is a big
Yeah.
issue.
Well,
Oh, I don't think I'm having a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. I'm just grazing all day.
yeah.
Because I think that's just what you're. Sorry.
Yeah. And
Sorry
that's
about that. Just thought I had to say that. I just
Yeah.
feel like I've got, not necessarily always the wrong things, but yes, there is an apple or a banana or some nuts or definitely lots of chocolate and crisps.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so occasionally checking in with ourselves and saying, okay, is that acceptable? Is that a useful thing for me to be doing? And then realizing sometimes that actually it might not be, and that's okay. So it's kind of being kind to ourselves in that regard. And I know, I was moaning at somebody because the wine and crisp thing was mine, and they went, well, that's your strategy. And of course, as soon as somebody pointed that out, I thought, well, I'd better change that strategy then, because that doesn't sound very good. So I think thinking about what we do and how we do it and those kinds of things are immensely valuable, and being honest to ourselves, even if we can't with other people. So the nature of what we can do is a lot. The question is always whether we do it, and that's the thing, isn't it, from today. So I've kind of skipped through the turnover time and thinking, and then kind of finishing with some things around resilience, because actually for any organization it starts with us. Whether we work for somebody, whether we're leading it, whatever context, our approach to all of those things depends on this looking after ourselves. And there's a bit of this that is just about nurturing, really, just about supporting each other. If we feel angry about something, do we really need to do that? Could we not just calm down and realize that somebody else is probably going through a really difficult time, and they've got, like we've got, a million things to juggle? They're probably in the same place. So the other thing, just for 1 minute, I'm going to tell you about, which you probably know already, but as part of this, is something that we deliver. So this is my only sales pitch, which is around Kickstart. So I didn't know whether you knew that we were a partner for Kickstart. So any of the organisations that you're working with who want to take on a young person, we can act as an intermediary for that. And it gives a 16 to 24-year-old who's on universal credit the chance to have 6 months in a place of work. And this is free to the employer. So the minimum wage or the national living wage is paid 100% for up to 25 hours, and their NI and pension, if that's applicable. And that will be for 6 months. The employer has to promise to work with that young person. They may decide to take them on ultimately, but equally some are looking at taking people on and rotating that, so others get the opportunity to do it. And we provide careers guidance in 3 schools at the moment. And I know from talking to young people that for those that don't know what career they want, this is an amazing opportunity to say, well, go and have 6 months at a fencing company that puts up fences outside, and then go and do 6 months, I'm just trying to think of some of the others, with a designer looking at how to use that. So, that those kinds of things, that is a really great opportunity. So I think I did that in about a minute. So that's my minute sales pitch. And we get paid a flat rate for the introduction, and then there's a training budget, which the employer and the intermediary determine how that's to be spent. So it's a really great project. Thank you. That is the end of my short presentation.